Hello, everybody, and welcome to another slightly symbological detailed diatribe. I got creative with the title, and now I'm not sure anyone's going to be able to understand what it's saying. You know what? That's okay. That's the risk we take. We take the big swings here on this channel sometimes.
I love Heart X box. Oh no.
Oh god, it's not working.
I loved PlayStation, but now I've been turned.
Yes, so for those of you who cannot parse these complex hieroglyphics, today I wanted to talk about the Netflix animated anthology series Love, Death, and Robots, which of course you can interpret from Heart X Astrobot, because there's, as of this year, season 4 just dropped, at time of recording fairly recently. There are now 45 episodes of the show, and I had kind of observed this phenomenon in a lot of people I talked to about this show, which is, I was like, oh, I watched Love, Death, and Robots, and they were like, oh yeah, I think I watched about 3 episodes of that back when it first aired, and then I just kind of fell off it. And I was like, perhaps there's something that can be done about this phenomenon, because I do think there's a lot of really interesting stuff to be found in here. But my goal for this presentation is to go through some of the episodes, some of the fun things, the highlights, to essentially provide a map, a guidebook, a way to approach this show if somebody is perhaps interested in these things without getting immediately alienated by some really weird shit.
Yeah, my experience was kind of similar because I saw some episodes of the first season when it aired, and then I simply did not care to watch any of the rest of it when it came out afterwards. And yeah, so I am very much in that boat of like, oh yeah, this is neat. Whatever.
Yeah.
Because also I feel like I've gotten jaded by the Netflix machine, and I periodically get surprised that they are in fact still capable of publishing things that are good. It catches me by surprise every time because most of what they do is not that. So when they can actually make stuff that is in fact quite good, it's like, oh, wait. You can do that still?
That's
Jeez,
allowed?
Okay.
Yes. One of the things that I found kind of startling about the response to the show is that even the people I know who are very, like, sci-fi fandom-minded weren't keeping up with it. So I was like, there's good stuff in here. What's going on? Is there a way that I can sort of provide a lower barrier to entry on this thing? And the reason why I'm interested in this is because Love, Death, and Robots, as an animated sci-fi anthology series, is basically just a shiny, high production value take on what is, I think, could be described inarguably as the backbone of science fiction. Sci-fi, at its core, is almost entirely short stories published in zines. This was a phenomenon that started back in the 1920s. Amazing Stories, Worlds of If, there's a ton of these things. They would be like monthly or bi-monthly periodicals that would just consolidate a bunch of short stories written by various different authors at the time. And if a sci-fi story that you know about isn't like a full-length novel, it was probably done in this format first. There are tons of big-name sci-fi writers who got their start doing this. Lots of the big-name sci-fi stories were originally published in this format. Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream. Anything you were made to read in like a 6th grade creative writing class that rewired your brain and then you couldn't figure out what the deal was with it was probably published in one of these, like, in 1958 or something like that. I think that this is interesting because as far as like the genres of fiction go, science fiction is probably one of the ones that lends itself best to this kind of short form anthology storytelling, because spec fic and sci-fi are generally built on the concept that you build an interesting futuristic world on some kind of speculative bit of technology or scientific advancement, and then you sort of explore what the world would look like in this future scenario. And you're not necessarily fixating on individual characters, and you're not necessarily doing grand scale quests or like large arcs. It's more a glimpse of a weird world that you're just sort of exploring as you're writing it. And this lends itself extremely well to short form fiction. It's something that doesn't really make it to a lot of the big name normie friendly parts of sci-fi because the parts of science fiction that I think most people are more familiar with are the ones that like make it to the big screen, in a 2-hour movie length block of fiction or bled over into things like superhero media or sci-fantasy. Older parts of fandom are very familiar with like the Sword and Planet era, but that sort of fell out of favor. Like Star Wars is kind of the last big instance of something that was in the Sword and Planet zeitgeist before it became so much its own thing. Also, Star Wars is not sci-fi. It's fantasy that's aesthetically sci-fi. We all know this. That's a conversation for later.
Space opera. I mean, I feel like representing in my camp the normie take is there's Star Trek and and that's kind of it.
That is,
for the corner of the literary ecosystem that I at least inhabit. But it's a kind of writing that, like you said, lends itself very well to short form because unlike mythological inspired stories or what became the fantasy genre, post Tolkien, it's not about plots and big motions and characters and journeys. It's like, here's an idea. I can convey that idea very quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't need to spend a lot of time getting all of this scene setting and this world and this plot and this progression and this movement through it. I can show it very, very elegantly, and then we're just done. Because it's not a terribly complicated progression of events. We're usually not dealing with like, oh, and then this other guy turned out to be evil. Whoa, and you had spent so many chapters getting to know him. It's like, that works great in fantasy. But in sci-fi, the focus is so much more particular in how does this world work and what is one weird consequence that it has, which, to be fair to epic fantasy, it does get into a lot of the interesting world building, and that becomes a staple of like, oh, how many maps and appendices does your fantasy epic have?
Yeah.
But it is interesting that sci-fi has kind of long had this heritage of being really damn short. Whereas fantasy is just bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And it's odd. Like, there on paper is not too much that separates those genres, and now we've kind of seen a lot of fantasy and sci-fi blending back into each other in the last like 10-15 years. I haven't read any of them, but I'm aware of the ecosystem broadly, so I'll be curious to see how this kind of spills out into our look through Love, Death, and Robots.
Yeah. Science fiction is, at its core, built on this speculative genre, world build something interesting, explore the consequences from a few different angles, and it lends itself very well to sort of granular small stories where like maybe only one thing will happen in a given story, or like one or two things. But a lot of the larger scale sci-fi epics got their start as like a short story written, offhandedly in like the 50s or 60s by a writer who was like, yeah, that's a cool idea. And then they were like, wait a second. And they come back and they get like 17 sequels out of it because, the concept can grow beyond your means. But at its core, science fiction as a genre is built in the foundations of short-form anthology zines, and it's really interesting that Love, Death, and Robots just tapped directly into that, like, sort of primordial firmament and just gave it a really shiny coat of paint and threw it into the screens of millions of viewers with barely any explanation. And the funny thing is, Love, Death, and Robots' direct inspiration is even more obscure than just the concept of short-form anthology zines. Originally, the guys who made it conceived of it as a remake of the 1981 animated movie Heavy Metal, which is an anthology movie of several disconnected shorts, both sci-fi and fantasy, sword and planet kind of thing, tied together by the framing sequence of an evil green orb is making us watch the movie. This idea was not very popular. They did not get much luck in funding the remake of this movie, which does have a cult following, I will give it that. But I watched the movie for this, and a cult following is about what it deserves. But Heavy Metal is itself one of those sci-fi anthology magazines. Heavy Metal, the movie, like, the logo of it is the logo of the magazine. The zine was originally French, very not safe for work, and illustrated. Unlike a lot of sci-fi zines, it was sci-fi and fantasy, and the stories in it could be basically anything, but they would be comics. Usually just a few pages at a time, and just like a little bit of a slice of a would that be fucked up or what? Or like a brief adventure in the larger life of an iconic sword and planet hero type. It's easy to translate most comics into animation. They're one of the mediums that translate more smoothly from one to the other. Heavy Metal is not a movie I recommend people watch, for the most part. It's very interesting. It's an interesting, weird little cultural time capsule, but I don't think it's particularly good, and I think there's a lot of really weird stuff in it. But it is extremely dedicated, I think, to proving that science fiction can also fuck. It is not just for nerds and the geeks.
What I'm getting from this is that the map for how to understand Love, Death, and Robots is, first, regard this thing off in the distance. Do not go to it.
Yeah, gaze at it maybe through your opera glasses and go, oh my word, and then move away.
Or actually, instead of oh my word, it's more sacre bleu.
Sacre bleu, you're so right.
Gasp Frenchly and then go in the opposite direction.
Perfect, yes. That's the exact way to do it. I don't think this movie is good. I do think it contains some extremely rad stuff. I think it explains literally everything about why Love, Death, and Robots is like that. Because it's not exactly a clean cross-section of like all sci-fi short stories that are being written. It's pretty impressed with the fact that you can just animate boobs and no one can stop you. It's funny, apparently the truism 90% of everything is crap was a specific response to that principle being applied to science fiction. People were saying, oh, 90% of science fiction is crap, and it's like, excuse you, 90% of everything is crap. You're just seeing it more clearly.
That is true.
Yeah, it is. But I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we start, plumbing the primordial ooze from which the science fiction genre constantly spawns new interesting things. Now that we know roughly where Love, Death, and Robots came from and what was on their mind when they started making it, let's start actually talking about Love, Death, and Robots. So it's very much following the spirit of heavy metal, but instead of tortuously chaining them together with a framing sequence involving an evil green orb, Love, Death, and Robots just lets every story be its own episode, as its own standalone thing. As an anthology series, every episode is an entirely new set piece, new characters, new vibe, new animation team. There's a few animation teams that they cycle through, but for the most part, every episode will be animated in its own style, and, of course, a new roll of the dice on how much you may or may not like it. It is also very impressed with the boobs thing. I cannot stress enough. It is very difficult to watch this show with parents in the house.
In my brief homework session of watching through some episodes of Love, Death, and Robots, I was very surprised by how much casual nudity there is.
Yeah.
It's not even like where it's the focus. It's just, oh no, this person's just not wearing a shirt.
Yep.
Or pants.
And here is their dog now, yeah. So we see a lot of this. I will get into it. That is part of my categorization system. I will not be dismissing it. But yes, at time of recording, there are 4 seasons of Love, Death, and Robots, a total of 45 episodes. I made it my project to watch every single one of them, and initially my plan was just to determine which ones were good or best. This is extremely subjective, and I rapidly learned that this approach was probably not going to be as helpful as some other approaches. So let's get into the actual approach that I took. And also, let's talk about why I want to do this, because I feel like this is like a closer, more like almost harsh look at this show than I've taken on almost anything I've covered in a detailed diatribe before. Normally, a detailed diatribe is me being like, I love this thing, and I want to tell everybody why it's so cool.
Except when it's the multiverse.
Except when it's the multiverse. You're right. I forgot all the dunks I took on Crisis on Infinite Earths. I'd clean that out
just
of
RAM. Just
RAM.
one more crisis, bro. Just one more.
Just one more crisis and we'll fix everything.
Just one more crisis.
Here's the thing. I think that Love, Death, and Robots is doing something incredibly valuable for the ecosystem of science fiction. I think that short-form sci-fi storytelling is so foundational to the genre, but it's also so broadly inaccessible. Like, unless you are digging up on archive.org the ancient, records of all of these zines to find where these concepts maybe originally came from and dealing with the 90% of everything is crap principle in the process, you're not really going to be able to access where this genre forms. You're only going to see the extremely highly polished, filtered, strained stuff that makes it all the way to the Star Trek levels of normie exposure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that what Love, Death, and Robots is doing, just by basically being like, here it is, a fire hose of just a bunch of broadly unfiltered science fiction concepts all at once. I think the more people get eyes on that, the more possibility there is for people to find things in this, frankly, let's be real, still fairly obscure part of the genre. Parts of nerd culture have become extremely mainstream. Parts of science fiction have become extremely well understood. Short-form, weird shit storytelling is not one of them. I think the most mainstream we ever got in that was The Twilight Zone. And they haven't been able to recapture the sauce on that in a while. They keep trying, but Black Mirror is very popular, but it's popular in specific stripes. I wouldn't be like Joe at the water cooler has probably been keeping up with Black Mirror religiously, you know what I mean?
My best exposure to Black Mirror is the college humor parody of Ye Me Wore Black.
Ye Me Wore Black.
Where it's in medieval times, and it's like, this lady got a book, and then she fell into hell because reading's a sin. Would that be fucked up or what?
Would that be fucked up or what? Yes. So in short, when I learned that Love, Death, and Robots was just basically tapping straight into the zines, giving them the full celebrity treatment, and just showing them to people, I was like, that's incredible. However, the other thing I think is that Love, Death, and Robots is a very mixed bag in both tone and quality. And I think that you can watch an episode that is exactly your jam, and the next episode will be so not your jam that you're just gonna be like, okay, I think I'm good. I'll watch something that I know I'm gonna like. Yeah. And this is a gamble you take with any anthology series, some episodes of Twilight Zone are very good and some episodes are kind of stupid. And that's fine. But I do think that especially with this, I'm invested in more people getting into sci-fi. I think that it would be good for people to expose themselves to some transgressive, uncomfortable, frankly kind of weird experimental shit. I think that it's good and awesome and more people should do it. But I almost worry that the way that it's being presented sometimes in this case is it's very easy for people to just hit the episode where they're like, this is so not my thing, and then just kind of slide off and then just go and watch something else.
Yeah. Two thoughts. One is I think the reason that this kind of thing is generally often the kind of corners of the literary and sci-fi ecosystem is because it is very hard to monetize. Comics are easy to make very popular because they're one story that runs forever. Superman gets invented in, like, what, 1938?
Yeah.
And then we're coming up on 100 in a decade. Like, it just prints money forever. People are going to be interested in Superman, and he's not really going anywhere, no matter how many crises you do. So this is, by contrast, much harder to monetize at scale for a long period of time, and thus, unless you get lucky and you basically hit Twilight Zone, it will have an enthusiast audience only rather than a mass market audience. And that is starting to change with the way that publishing trends have again been moving around a little bit, becoming more popular. The idea people are actually willing to kind of invest in a ginormous, like, tree of a book to read through some, epic fantasy sci-fi thing. Sanderson is mixing fantasy elements with sci-fi elements.
Yeah,
obviously
you're right.
much more on the fantasy side.
But Sanderson is actually doing Sword and Planet. That hadn't even occurred to me.
Yeah, a lot of these things are starting to kind of come back together, and it's from an expansion of what fantasy can be, rather than, in my interpretation, rather than trying to go back to some very specific thing from sci-fi and build that out. It's basically fantasy is kind of evolving into a broader genre that can encompass more things within it, and that's a good thing in the publishing space. But in regards to your point of, like, a mixed bag in terms of quality and tone, the reason, I'm sure we'll get into this, of why this may be largely harmful to the project of Love, Death, and Robots is that you cannot account for taste and what people might be interested in one episode to another. And thus, even if an episode of a show is really good, if it's just gross and has an icky crab monster, that's going to limit the ability of some audience members to get into it. That you can't really work around. That's just part of the game. But quality is something that they can work around. And some of the episodes that I had seen, I'm like, this is simply not very well made, even if it is on paper exactly my shit. We might talk about an example of that later.
We might, yeah.
And I think being able to better select for quality within a given season of Love, Death, and Robots, maybe being a little more specific. And I feel like they actually got a little better at this because subsequent seasons were shorter. The first season was like 14 episodes,
18.
and the next two were like 8 and even worse.
It was a lot,
we're like 8 and 9. So I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go. But if I was to kind of like snipe the thesis out from here, it's good to have a variety of different things that may not sit with one viewer and will absolutely be the other's jam, but you gotta hit a certain bar of quality, and some of these episodes might just straight up not.
Maybe, yeah. I do think that, of course, judging quality of anything is very subjective, which is why I quickly scrapped my initial plan of, like, I'll find the good ones, because, like, whose fucking opinion? There's an entire subreddit just devoted to people doing tier lists of Love, Death, and Robots episodes. I'm not here to add another one to the pile. But I do think that there's something interesting to just real quick touch on, because the thing you mentioned about, like, this episode might be my thing, but there's something about, like, the presentation or the tone that's just really putting me off because it just happens to be not my thing. Every story sort of passively selects for the audience it's expecting to have for it. And this is something I felt extremely strongly when I was watching Heavy Metal, because it's pretty clear from the way that movie animates boobs that it was mostly expecting horny young men to be watching that movie. It was not particularly interested in presenting female characters as having any sort of internality or agency, except in the final story where there's a badass Sword and Planet heroine named Tarna who doesn't say a word but is extremely cool in a obviously leather bikini and thigh-high boots because it was the 80s. But like, every story selects for the audience that will be most comfortable seeing it and feel most welcome by the tone of the story, the characters presented. This is just a thing. This is just a thing everyone's sort of aware of. When you're watching an episode of this and you're like, this story's good, but man, they really like putting slime on things, like, that's kind of selecting for an audience that's okay with that or into it, rather than someone for whom it's like, textural nightmare, okay. Like, and again, the fact that this is such a shotgun blast of different animation styles, genres, tone, means that there are going to be some episodes where it's like, this is a gushy episode. This is one that makes you feel sticky just by looking at it. Yeah. Versus like, this is a very like clean, crisp episode, And obviously we're just at this point talking about like the visible grossness factor of it. But, everything will have an aesthetic element that makes you think like, okay, this feels good for me, or like, this doesn't really work. And that's completely fine. The fact that Love, Death, and Robots has got a much wider distribution of aesthetics and tones that they bring in, then again, it's source material heavy metal, which is very consistent in a few key ways.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And I do think that it's worth unpacking in this specific regard, because the thing I want to avoid is people smacking into the episode that doesn't work for them like a bird in a windshield and then just going like, okay, I'm done. I'm outie. I'm gone.
This detailed diatribe is hanging some shiny things in the windows so that the birds know, oh, that's a solid surface.
Yeah, I'm putting up those refractive stickers. So my initial plan, as I said, was to identify the best episodes. This turned out to be easy and also pointless. So my actual plan began to make a roadmap to help other viewers through the show, to sort of give them like a little bit of like a Here There Be Dragons, but like if you're into dragons, maybe check out the Here There Be Dragons part, you know, that kind of thing. Rather than just being like, oh, these ones are good, and these ones, not good. So I tried to, instead of being like, these ones good, these ones, I tried to break the episodes down along tonal lines, along genres, broad categories, vibes, and a grossness metric. To be completely transparent, the grossness metric includes everything from the slime factor to the full frontal nudity factor. It's basically just things that make me wince if I'm watching it with my mom. I'm not trying to be like, oh, the human form is so disgusting. It's just, you know, in my brain, I was like, this is the easiest way to...
As someone who watched a few episodes of this in a cafe over breakfast, consider the grossness factor. How much can you watch this in a public space?
That's fucking bold.
Along any axis.
Yes, so I've never seen two people's tier lists of this show agree on more than like a handful of episode placements, and even ones that I thought were shoo-ins for top tier would frequently show up near the bottom of some people's lists. Objective quality, if such a thing even exists in the judgment of art, is a far less important judgment than how much is this my shit. And that's a metric that I can't calculate for anyone except for me. But you will still hear about it, don't worry, I'm not gonna fucking tease you. Anthology series are a smorgasbord. They're like a buffet. You know, you don't think that everything is gonna be perfect for any one person. The purpose of this analysis is to provide essentially a breakdown, an ingredients list, a flavor profile, a wine pairing, etc., and a quick analysis of a few of my personal favorites and what parts about that I like them so much. Basically, for the people for whom this entire show premise doesn't sound appealing, that part is just to be like, but have you considered this bit is cool? The actual detail bit of the diatribe, you could say. The first breakdown that I did for the episodes was, which of these following 4 major messages does the episode seem to have underlying its main theme? The first one, of course, being really makes you think, doesn't it? Which are the episodes that have something to say about society or humanity or philosophy or the nature of things? It's a real Black Mirror kind of thing. It basically is built around the premise of like, damn, in this speculative scenario, there sure are things we can understand about ourselves. Those 3 robots episodes where the robots are just walking through post-apocalyptic humanity and dunking on how stupid humans were for destroying themselves, that's a really makes you think, doesn't it, episode. When the Yogurt Took Over is one where yogurt manages to be better at running humanity than humans are because humans are so bad at it, and there's a bit where the narrator is like, we asked ourselves, how could it have come to this? And it's like, yep, that's a really makes you think, doesn't it? Because the question is, how would it come to this? Could we make a better society in the real world than the one the yogurt created in this episode? You know, that kind of thing. Zima Blue was a little bit on the line, but I put it in this one because it does seem to be about like the contemplative nature of artistic pursuit and the search for perfection. I know this is one of the episodes you liked, so...
I really liked Zima Blue. This is one of the first batch that I saw when I watched the first season. I remembered the ending of it. Essentially, it's an artist who gets more and more obsessed with this particular shade of blue. He starts incorporating it into his paintings and bigger canvases, and then I remember when it's like, and then he had an entirely blue canvas and it was huge. People are like, damn, I guess that's it. That's kind of like, where else can you go? And I'm like, yeah, where else can you go? And then the next shot is like, there's a canvas in the middle of a city. There's a canvas in space next to an asteroid. He spray paints an entire belt of like space debris around like the rings of Saturn. I'm like, oh, fuck, that is really cool. He like spray paints Jupiter, so when the sun comes around it, the entire like band across the eye is just that blue. It's like, oh, fuck. And then he has his final thing, and it ends up being that he was originally a robot meant to clean swimming pools. So his final performance art piece is that he's going to jump into a pool and his body will just disassemble, and then he's going to be the swimming pool robot just cleaning the tiles of that color blue that he was so obsessed with. And it's like, it's a very simple idea, a guy who goes more and more and more and more and more complicated, and then it's like, what if I actually did the simple thing that actually makes me happy and at peace? And it's very, very clean, but it is presented so well and so lavishly that the simplicity of the ending really, really hits. After, like, he spray painted space his color of blue that will destroy the ecosystem of those, like, rocks in space forever, because who knows what chemicals were in that paint. And now he's just a little pool cleaning robot.
Just a little guy.
It's like, ooh, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think it's really interesting because the way I saw that episode is that he's got this like hunger in him somewhere. He's like, there's something in me. I desire something that will bring me peace. And it would be that the whole world is this shade. So he makes these bigger and bigger canvases, fills more and more of the world with it. And then eventually he's like, I'm doing this the wrong way. The problem is that I can perceive the vastness of the universe and I can never paint it all my favorite shade of blue. So if I simply shrink down my perceptions of the world, my understanding of reality until it is just me and the blue tiles and the task of making them shiny and perfect, then I will be content. Because like you can't make the whole universe conform to your vision, but you can make yourself small enough that your vision becomes manageable. And I just thought that was, again, it really makes you think, doesn't it?
It's a very elegant little dichotomy where he is trying to make his art big, but finally succeeds by making himself small.
Yeah.
It's very clean. It's a simple idea. It's not that complicated, but it's just presented so well. And there are, the reason that I said, like, oh, the quality is inconsistent, it's because there are some episodes that I had seen before, and even some ones that I rewatch now, where it's like, I don't think they are pursuing an idea very far at all. And that is what I feel like is when I say, like, oh, some of the quality is really not great, it's because they are not actually interrogating an idea really in any way. And that's, to me, like, what are you doing here? You're not even really asking a question or having a thesis. So if we jump down to the bottom, it exists, an episode that happened without any aspirations to do anything else. Alternate history sucked ass. It was such a dumb concept of, like, oh, let's see a bunch of different ways we can kill Hitler. It's like, okay, cool, it's played for comedy. It's not trying to be that complicated, but it's like, you have a premise of you can do anything in history, and you go to the most basic thing and don't do very much with it, even as it starts to get a little more like, oh, and here are the different ways he can die still in this 1 year. It's like he gets hit by a truck, he gets crushed by an asteroid. It's like, well, as a historian, I was like, oh, this could be interesting, and then I remembered, oh, wait, no, this was shit when I watched it, and it's shit now. Not to be too harsh on the people who made it, I understand what they were going for, but it felt like it didn't belong in this show because it was not engaging with the question to any degree of depth that I found even remotely meaningful. So,
not to defend this episode, because I also don't like it very much, I do think that one of the genuine strengths of Love, Death, and Robots' shotgun blast approach is that there is space in the roster for both a really contemplative, really makes you think, doesn't it, episode, and also just a goofy little idea that the writer had as a funny little, like, framing of, hey, what if you mess with the timeline? Let's see what happens. But what if you were just like, how many different ways can I think of to kill Hitler? Let's have fun with it. Is it my favorite? No. Do I rewatch it? No. But I do think that, like, conceptually, it is good that there is room in the show and room in the creative space for something relatively short, unpolished, and just plain goofy. There's an argument to be made about the fact that if everything needs to be a really complex, contemplative thing in order to justify its screen time, the barrier to entry in this space of otherwise pretty accessible short-form storytelling can become a little bit complicated. But there is also, of course, the middle ground, because the really makes you think, doesn't it, side of things is, of course, the episodes that spark these deeper contemplative concepts, you know, this sort of internal exploration of what it means to, you know, be creative as an artist, to be fulfilled, you know, what it means to be human, how to best comport yourself in a complicating, changing world. But there's also other categories, like Would That Be Fucked Up or What? Which is just an episode where some weird goddamn shit goes down. These episodes will confront the viewer with, like, a gross alien spider, or a killer robot, or a really big dead guy. Would that be fucked up or what? In an episode where it's like, there might be a deeper message in here somewhere, but for the most part, it is truly just, damn, That would be fucked up, wouldn't it? Okay, that's a would that be fucked up or what? There's a bunch of these. I have on the next few slides, I have a few example episodes that highlight all of these categories, so we'll be able to interrogate them a little bit more strongly there. The third major category that isn't the It Exists box for the episodes that I didn't really get is Sick as Hell, which are the episodes that are just straight up cool. There may be deeper messages that are present. There will almost certainly be some kind of speculative element that would be a little bit fucked up or what, but the focus on these is largely on badass fight scenes, cool characters with fun designs. These episodes often feel like they are like a single installment in the larger life of a cool character having cool adventures. And there's a few of these. They're a lot of fun. One of the examples I have on here is Blind Spot, which is truly just a bunch of cyborgs do a heist on a convoy going through a tunnel, and all the cyborgs get like exploded during the chase except for one, and then at the end he learns that all the others had like backups of their brains, so they're all fine and literally there's no consequences and everything is chill. And he's like, oh, okay, cool, nice everybody, and then they just like, episode ends. Sick as hell.
Sounds like an episode of Samurai Jack.
Yeah, truly. It would just be sick as hell. There's no broader message. The thing they're getting is a little MacGuffin microchip. It truly does not matter. It's just sick as hell. Just kind of running these down. The example that I have for the Really Makes You Think, doesn't it, is the episode Pop Squad, starring a suspiciously Nolan Northy noir detective. Pop Squad I sort of had initially on the line between Really Makes You Think, doesn't it, and Would That Be Fucked Up or What? But I think it has enough contemplation of society and humanity and parenting and child rearing that it's more interested in making you think than in contemplating Would That Be Fucked Up or What? This is also probably the grimmest episode of the entire show. I don't remember if I assigned this one to you.
No.
Yeah.
You suggested it, but I went to go watch a couple other ones instead.
Yeah, completely fair. So the premise of Pop Squad is that it's sometime in the future, and everyone has access to a eternal youth drug called Reju. It does not appear to cost money. It does not appear to have any bad side effects. There does not appear to be any class barrier even. It's not like, oh, only the rich get it. It just seems to be a thing that everybody gets. In a world where nobody ages and nobody really naturally dies, the only real danger is, of course, overpopulation, which could become an absolute runaway problem if all of these eternally 20-somethings kept having kids. So obviously, to avoid a population crisis, the rule is that nobody can have kids. And, that's fine, because, like, what's even the use of making new people when the old people are just gonna stay young and hot and badass forever? This is, of course, the first step in the Really Makes You Think, doesn't it? Disrupting the seeming perfection of this immortal society, some weirdos will choose to stop their Reju treatment and sneak off into the, like, ruins at the base of their giant shining city in the clouds and secretly have kids and, like, raise children or try to. And obviously, this hideous crime must be prevented by the Pop Squad, which I believe means population control, who are a crack team that basically go and, like, apprehend those weirdos to get them back to civilization and back on their Reju treatments, and, of course, to get rid of the unregistered offspring. So our suspiciously Nolan Northy noir detective's job is going off and finding toddlers and then shooting them in the face. And he starts to wonder if perhaps, maybe this job of his is not a good thing, actually, perhaps.
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies? This is a very, very grim episode, and it doesn't really end on a particularly resolved, positive note. In an effort to understand why some of these maniacs go off and bring children into the world that he then has to go and shoot in the face, he realizes that he can track down people who may be having unlicensed children by following people who go to the antique store to purchase children's toys, because of course they are only useful as antiques and presents for people to do cool things. His girlfriend, who like performed a really impressive solo, gets rewarded by a plush dinosaur because she conquered this dinosaur of a complicated vocal solo. Do you get it? And of course it gives him a full PTSD flashback because the kid that he shot that morning had a dinosaur plushie. And then he's like, wait a minute, nobody's making new toys. So parents who need to keep their kids quiet, because otherwise I go and shoot them in the face, need to be giving them something to play with, which means they need to be frequenting these antique stores. So he goes to one and he sees this young woman purchasing this toy, and he sort of follows her and finds that indeed she does in fact have a child, and they have this very tense conversation where he's like, why would you do this? What's going on? Like, I don't understand. And she's like, I'm not so in love with myself that I want to be here forever without making anything new. I've been around for 200 something years. I've seen too much, but she hasn't seen anything. She's new, she's exciting, she could be so many things, except for the fact that it's your job to shoot her in the face. Anyway, by the end of the episode, our protagonist and his much more ruthless partner have essentially killed each other because his partner followed him down, and they did an Old West style draw on each other, and they shot each other. And the thing is, this is technically, potentially, a positive ending note, because if two people die, theoretically, there's two new slots for new people to be okay okay with register. That is the closest thing to a happy ending this episode has. It's like, damn, maybe by his sacrifice, it will be okay for this child to grow up, except for the fact that this does not seem like the kind of society that really gives a shit about that. Like I said, grim. The reason I wanted to bring this episode up is not just because I do genuinely think it's pretty profoundly impactful in a few different ways, but it's a little bit bottom shelf emotional manipulation. It's like, hey, what if we show him shooting this adorable toddler in the face, from a tasteful cutaway? We only see the gun firing and then him looking upset about it. What if we started with that, and then the rest of the episode was him feeling bad about it? Like, yeah, obviously you're gonna feel upset about that. This thing is made to, get the knife in there and just start twisting. But I also feel like this is probably one of the early episodes that might make you go, okay, I think I'm done. I think I'm gonna go watch more like She-Ra or something, or that new K-pop Demon Hunter show that looks interesting. This is a lot after alternate histories.
Is this the one that comes right after?
No, so the thing is, because it's an anthology series, Netflix reorders the episodes sometimes. They'll just kind of randomize it. It's a little bit weird. So there's no strictly canonical ordering for the episodes, and this one especially is not connected to any of that. There's a couple episodes that take place in the same larger scale shared universe. I think Swarm and Spider Rose take place in the same universe. Anyway, this one I just wanted to unpack because it's like, damn, this is a fucking lot. This is a lot to deal with. But it is probably the pinnacle of the really makes you think, doesn't it, episode archetype. It's a very, damn, yeah, that really does make me think about, like, if I could live forever, but at the cost of never creating anything new, would that be worth it? It's interesting. I genuinely do think this episode is quite solid. It's on my rewatch list, even though it does make me feel very bad. Meanwhile, exemplar of would that be fucked up or what, the episode I've chosen is Fish Night. Not just because one of the main actors is Yuri Lowenthal, and I thought that was funny. This is a very, very beautiful episode, and it is also straight out of the Twilight Zone. It is the most would that be fucked up or what situation I think I've ever seen in this show. The start of the episode is these two salesmen stall out in their old jalopy in the middle of the desert, and then they just kind of settle in to conserve water and, sleep through the day, and then they'll try and hike back to a nearby town, get help, the next day. And they're sort of contemplating. There's a little bit of really makes you think, doesn't it? Because, of course, the profession of salesman has been dying for decades. That's what the whole thing of Death of a Salesman is about. So, you got the grizzled old fella who's like, this profession's dying, and the young hotshot Yuri Lowenthal is like, nah, man, we're great and cool and awesome, and we're never gonna die, especially not in 6 hours. So they settle in, and they also are like, man, you ever think about how the desert used to be an ocean? And I wonder if there's ghosts of things that aren't people. That would be weird. And then they go to sleep, and then they wake up at night, and there are fish ghosts everywhere. Ta-da. They're beautiful, luminous ghosts of the ocean bottom that this used to be. And of course, it's a wondrously beautiful experience. It's ethereal. It's magical. They're having this transcendent moment, and Yuri Lowenthal is like, whoa, this slaps. Oh my gosh, I can feel the fish ghosts. And then he's like, hey, let me try something. And he runs off. He wants to go swimming in this ghost ocean that may or may not be there. And the older salesman is like, hey, kid, you can't skate here. You're going to get yourself in trouble. And Yuri Lowenthal's like, whatever, man. And he does, in fact, successfully swim. So he's just flying in this beautiful, ancient fish ghost desert ocean thing happening. It's very pretty. And then he gets eaten by a giant shark, and the episode ends. So anyway, I'm Rod Serling.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't watch that one.
It's peak Twilight Zone. I think this one is meaner than Pop Squad, if I'm being completely honest. Pop Squad lets you know right out the gate how you're going to be feeling for the entire episode. This one is oh my god, it's whimsical, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. These guys were having a really bad time, but look, this guy's fulfilling everyone's dream to fly. Just kidding, he's been eaten by a shark. Okay, next episode. And it's just yeah, okay.
For those of you who are not on the video call, which is all of you, Red dabbed in real life when she said next episode.
I did. It's spiritual, it's all about the performance. So this one is it's what it says on the box. It's very would that be fucked up or what? Just a really weird goddamn thing happening. This doesn't feel like a single installment of a larger adventure. Obviously, Yuri Lowenthal's fucking dead, so that's, rest in peace. Aesthetically, it really does work. It manages to sell this beautiful, ethereal, incomprehensible experience that could be a dream, could be a nightmare. That's just what you get on the borders of The Scary Door. Okay. And then Sick as Hell. This one is probably an uncomplicated pick because this was in season 1. Almost everybody who watched the show saw it. it, and pretty much everyone knows that it's cool and badass. And the episode, of course, is Sonnie's Edge. The premise is that it's like a cyberpunk future pit fighting arena, and instead of fighting each other, these gladiators fight each other through remote-controlled, bioengineered bodies of cool living weapons. And our protagonist, Sonnie, has a very cool-looking beastie who's never lost a fight, and this extremely sleazy guy was like, I think you should take a dive for me, and she's like, no, f*** you. And they're like, oh, well, surely I will not make you regret this immediately. And then it's a cool, badass pit fight, but there's this underlying question, which is, of course, the title of the episode. What is Sonnie's Edge? You know, she's never lost a fight, she doesn't take dives, so like, what's going on? Why does she always win? And her two friends are like, oh, you know, it's because of a tragic backstory, you know, she got all like f***ed up by a bunch of guys, and now she just fucks up men. And Sonnie's like, guys, you're making me seem very two-dimensional. And it's like, oh, you know, is her dark and brooding past? Is it that she's the only girl? Is it that she fights harder? Is it her willpower and disregard for pain? No, the actual answer is, spoiler alert, it's that when she got fucked up in her dark and brooding past, she was way too injured, and they put her brain in the giant monster permanently. So when she's in the pit fight, she's literally in the pit fight, and she's fighting so hard because if the beastie dies, she just actually dies, which is extremely cool and badass, and it's a very fun reveal. This is a pretty gory episode, unsurprisingly. There's a lot of gross shit, but you could easily see these characters kind of going off to have like more interesting adventures and cool confrontations later. It feels like we're getting one slightly important episode in the lives of these characters, which is cool and dope, and there really isn't much really else. Yeah, it's not something that really makes you think. It's not something that would be particularly fucked up or what. It is truly just sick as hell.
Makes you think a little.
It makes you think a little, you know, obviously. Yeah. But the thing is, like,
secondary.
It is, yeah. And the parts of it that, like, are the most, like, really makes you think bait, which is, of course, like, oh, you know, Sonnie's dark and brooding past being, like, assaulted and tortured. Oh, it sucks. You know, oh, she's a woman who's fighting back against the men. And it's like, yeah, but this is, like, the cover story that her friends use to hide the fact that her brain is in the giant monster. And, like, that's fun, genuinely. Like, I've seen people complain about that episode, like, oh, it's so cliche. And it's like, yeah, it would be if that were true, but clearly Sonnie is actually just like, all right, I'm here to kick ass, take names, and be a cool giant monster. In the final category, this is extremely low-hanging fruit. Nobody liked this episode. It was the first episode that most people saw of season 4, and it is truly just an AMV of a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert, but everyone is puppets. Maybe if I liked the song more, I'd be okay with it.
Interesting. Is it the song Can't Stop?
Maybe. I didn't really internalize any of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can only assume.
I would assume so.
How long of the episode is it?
It's like 4 minutes.
Like, you know, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it is the song Can't Stop. Yeah. I mean, I like that song, but not make an episode out of puppets much.
Yeah.
Weird.
It's a very strange choice. It's also really not about love, death, or robots, which feels like it's got to be about one of those things to qualify,
it's
right?
It's like Indigo's rule that, like, if you come on Movie Struck, it has to be a movie.
It has to be a movie,
There's one very permissive rule that you have to follow.
In my brief scroll through the subreddit where I was seeing all those tier lists, I did see this one baffling a lot of people, and my favorite response that I saw a lot of people have is like, man, I feel like this episode would be great if, like, in the last 10 seconds it, like, panned up and showed, like, a big alien was controlling all the marionettes. Then I would have forgiven it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, then at least I would have understood why it's on this show. Yeah, it exists. It doesn't really do anything else. The general consensus is that this would have been a completely respectable, even very impressive for its animation quality, YouTube video. But why is it one of only 10 episodes of a season of television that the viewers waited 3 years for? You know what I mean? It's just, meh. Yeah, so when I say it exists, this is the metric I'm talking about. Like, I have to acknowledge that it exists, but I don't have to do anything more than that.
When I talk about, like, the quality bar sometimes being low, these are the episodes that I'm talking about. Like, I feel like Love, Death, and Robots could have had just enough of a pass on the episode concepts to kind of weed out some of these ones that are truly just here to be here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm after. That's what I really mean.
Yeah. It's also not an adaptation of any short-form science fiction storytelling, so it's not even doing the thing I like the show for. So, like, it's, you know, not to keep pummeling it while it's down with its 4.1 out of 10 rating on IMDb. I'm just saying. Not my favorite.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about every episode, but here are all the categorizations. Feel free to pause and see what they are and see if you agree with me. This is not the last chart in this slideshow. This is, in fact, only the first of several. You know, these are mostly vibes-based categorizations. Some of them are arguable. Some of them could potentially walk the line between one or two of these things. But broadly, this is how I did it.
From the ones that I've seen, I remember watching Ice Age and thinking, I mean, yes, it is. Would that be fucked up or what? Which is definitely better than It Exists.
It's very funny, I will say, entirely because the two protagonists are just taking everything in stride in a very, like, chill way. Just like, oh, fuck, I think I've been hit by some sort of nuclear missile or something. It's like, oh, you have a really funny sunburn. Oh, thanks, man. Anyway, do you want to, like, get the beers out of the cooler? That episode is just very funny to watch because it's like, you know, if this happened to me, I probably would react similarly. It's not like, oh my God, call the media. It's just like, there's a Stone Age civilization forming in our ancient freezer. Okay.
Yeah.
So I hope that you guys have had your time to give it a look, take your screenshots. There is, of course, another category that they could be broken down by, and that is the genre. So as a whole, Love, Death, and Robots is officially classified in the horror genre, but of course, every episode is its own thing. Some of the episodes are dark comedies, some of them are regular comedies, some of them are full-blown horror, some of them are more thriller, which the distinction between horror and thriller is something people have been arguing about for decades. My argument is that horror is like something's really, really wrong and it's really terrifying and your job is to escape it. And thriller is a little bit more like something's very wrong, but also it's probably making you like a worse person to be dealing with it somehow.
I feel like thriller also has more of an air of mystery to it than horror, where it's like, you know immediately that the problem in Bad Traveling is the crab monster.
Yeah, you're very right. Yeah, I think that thriller is a little bit more like, so what's going on? What is the true nature of this horror? You're right. That's a good distinction. Action, obviously most of the Sick as Hell episodes are action, but there are other things that are also action. And the last category that I did for this is melancholy, because some of these episodes are just like slow and contemplative, and it's a little bit more about the vibes and like they're inspiring an emotion, usually kind of a bad one. Meditations perhaps on mortality, inadequacy, tragedy, a changing world. We'll get to it.
Those ones are exactly my shit.
Yes. So again, instead of doing an individual episode by episode rundown, I just did another chart. There's a bunch of them here. This is about how I broke them down. Bad Traveling is for sure in the horror category. I also put How Zeke Got Religion in there, even though there is a lot of action in it, because the overwhelming...
I think that's fair.
Yeah, the overwhelming vibe is a lot
that one
more
is
horror.
horrifying.
Yeah, exactly. I only had a few in the thriller category, and the only one of those I'm a little bit unsure of the placement of is Shapeshifters, because that's the one about, like, what if there were werewolves in the military and they experienced werewolf racism. But it's a little bit more of a mystery. It's kind of like, the military's telling you to do this one thing, but the wolves have their own code, so it's very like personal tragedy kind of thing. You may note from this, there are an overwhelming number of dark comedy episodes. A lot of the episodes that are horrific are like, the comedy is more relevant than the horror. There are fewer just regular comedy episodes. There are some, even with some of these, there's like fridge horror, like, the yogurt took over, involves the end of the world as we know it and conquest by a functionally alien life form, but it's not really played as horror. But yeah, there's a lot of dark comedy. Some of these being called comedies might be a little bit shaky, but no, I'll stand by this. I'm always correct and never wrong.
I don't know what other category I would put alternate histories in, but it definitely wasn't funny. This is the one episode I'm going to be really mean about.
Hey, we're not judging how effective it is at being comedy.
I know.
But yeah, no, you're right. And of course, for the final main metric that I was using, there is the grossness metric. This is a grown-up show for grown-ups and a spiritual successor to heavy metal. It's gross in a lot of ways. I am here defining gross as anything that would make me wince uncomfortably, especially if I was watching it with my mom.
Or in a cafe.
You're so right. Which does mean that the many slimy tentacles of the episode Swarm and the full frontal nudity of the episode The Witness are in the same space in my head. Minimal grossness. You might see a very small penis from very far away, but that's basically going to be it.
That's such a funny phrase.
Thank you.
It's because it's far away and it's small. You didn't have to do him dirty like that.
Well, it's important to be specific in these things.
Small in frame, perhaps, but that's not what you said, which is way funnier.
You're very right. Low grossness would contain enough blood and or boobs to get you judged in the public cafe, as aforementioned, but you should really be wearing your headphones anyway. Full frontal nudity.
Oh my god.
This is the category containing full frontal nudity. We still have 3 more categories to go. Moderate is like mid-level grossness. You probably don't want to eat your lunch watching it, but it's probably not going to make you not want to eat for the rest of the day. There might be fingers and limbs mangling. Somebody might get eviscerated bloodily on screen, but only if the art style makes it funny. There are some deaths that take place in the episode Sucker of Souls. A guy gets fully cut in half and you see his entire body explode in half layer by layer, and I was like, that could be catastrophic grossness if this were animated by Blur, but because it's 2D animation and we're clearly supposed to think this is kind of funny, then it's moderate. Extreme grossness is that it's very nasty, but there is a conceivable way that it could be made worse. Catastrophic is max grossness. There are only a handful of episodes in the catastrophic category, and here they are. It was a little bit surprising for me to observe that honestly, minimal grossness did kind of win out. There were more episodes that were minimally gross than the episodes that were catastrophic, but because these are all getting shown in a sort of randomized order mixed together, you never know when you're going to get blindsided by, like, full booba in the middle of a cafe.
I'm thinking, like, how Zeke Got Religion is pretty fierce, but I guess I can't imagine a way that it could have been worse. So yeah, that's a fair categorization of only an extreme.
Around the third time I saw someone's skull get very, slowly crushed, I was like, oh, they really like that one move. But if it were done in a non-2D animation style, it would have been worse. Therefore, it is extreme, not catastrophic. A lot of these are sort of personal, it depends on like what's your personal squick factor. I know for a lot of people, Jibaro was very gross. I found it kind of moderate. Honestly, the tall grass probably doesn't need to go in low. It could be minimal because there's gross, creepy stuff in there, but they don't I don't think you even see any blood in that episode, which is pretty unusual for Love, Death, and Robots. A few people get, eaten in the Screaming of the Tyrannosaur. Oh, I forgot there's that part where everyone kind of bathes in blood. It's fine. That's the Mr. Beast episode. This is kind of a general aesthetic categorization. Some of these episodes, for your personal taste, might be, one notch higher, one notch lower, but this is the general safe bet that I was using.
Standard deviation within one category, up or down.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, for the sake of comprehensibility, here's the intersection of all three of those charts we had before. It's less pretty than the other three, but it is more comprehensible, and it shows some interesting trends, which I thought was kind of cool. So, of course, the message is on the y-axis, the genre is on the x-axis, so you can see, there's really only one episode that is a regular comedy that would also be fucked up or what, which is Ice Age, the one with Topher Grace and Tiny Civilization in their freezer. There's a lot of would that be fucked up or what horror. There's more dark comedy, really makes you think, doesn't it? But there's also a lot of melancholy, really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there's not that many it exists outside of the comedy columns, at least by my estimation.
And again, looking at the distribution, you can really see based on what message you want and what genre you want. Like the three episodes I liked the most, Zima Blue, Very Pulse of the Machine, and Good Hunting, are melancholy really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a very efficient way to find what you want.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty proud of this chart. I hope it works for more people. I've only minimally tested it. Of course, I watched all 45 episodes, so I'm not even sure what my favorites are anymore, except yes, I am. We'll see them in a couple slides. But obviously, I'll keep this on the screen. You can pause if you think this will be useful. I hope it'll be useful. I'm trying to think if there's any of these that I was a little bit unsure where to put.
I don't actually see Can't Stop on here. I was looking for it in the It Exists space, but I think that's probably what it deserves.
Well, that's the problem. I truly could not figure out what genre to put it in because is it funny? No. Is it dark funny? Also no. Is it horrific? No. Does action happen? No. Is it melancholy? No. Is it a thriller? No. I didn't want to dignify it with its own column. So it's just kind of... It
exists, and it is no thing specifically.
Yeah, so
it merely is.
It simply is. I think that's the only one that got the unpersoning of shame, where I just did not list it on some of these charts, because I truly did not know how to categorize it, and I didn't think it was worth it.
Yeah.
You will note that some of these, the text is low opacity, because that's one where I was like, I'm kind of sure of this categorization. It's arguable that you could put it in this box instead. So Sucker of Souls is, would that be fucked up or what? Because it's what if you opened a tomb and Dracula was in it, but he's feral animal Dracula, and he splits a guy in half, from the nave to the chaps. And it's yeah, that would be fucked up or what? But the episode tone is dark comedy. But also there's a lot of action, so arguably you could put it in Sick as Hell, and Kill Team Kill is very similar, even more stupid. It's just a crack team of mercenaries versus a CIA experiment cyborg bear that shoots lasers kind of situation. situation. Like, it's very goofy. Arguably, I think that one is mostly in... Yeah, that one's mostly in just action and sick as hell, because it's not really trying to be anything else, but it does have enough dark comedy in it that I felt like it needed to be listed. Anyway, so, it's a little bit of an inexact science, but if you identify, like, coordinates on the graph that look interesting, and then you're like, oh, there's something in here that's a little bit low opacity, maybe that would be up my alley. Maybe if I want to see something that's horror, and also would that be fucked up or what, I could watch Swarm, even though it also kind of really makes you think, doesn't it, with its core thesis that sapience is not a favorable trait in the grand scheme of the natural selection process of the galaxy. That really makes you think. But it shouldn't, because sapience is not a trait that is selected for. And also they're color coordinated. So anything that is in the red to yellow range is high grossness. Blue is basically no grossness. Again, a small penis from very far away. You get one of those in Fish Night. But yeah, for the most part, minimal grossness. The green ones are, you might see full frontal nudity, but yeah. Anyway, it's time to actually talk about the episodes that I like. Because I simply gotta.
That moon is going to slam into that canvas. What was Zima thinking?
I'm sure the canvas is, co-orbital with it or something like that. Anyway, this one, uncontroversial pick, Good Hunting. I think this is probably the best episode of the show overall.
Yeah. That's fair.
Gross level pretty low. The genre of it is very melancholy. It's contemplative. It takes place in this steampunk version of Hong Kong, a very changing world. These kids are, the child of a demon hunter and a fox spirit, respectively. But as they grow up and the world industrializes around them and the British show up to call, they sort of find that the magic that sustained their old way of life drains away. So the son of the demon hunter goes off to the big city to seek his fortune and turns out to be really good with machines. The daughter of the fox spirit finds that she's lost her magic and she's stuck in a human form, which she doesn't like because it's not natural to her, and she doesn't really have the cool abilities she normally would have. So she has to go seek her fortune by becoming a prostitute, and bad things happen to her, and then they decide to make her an extremely cool cyborg that turns into a fox. And there's sort of like this mild implication at the end that maybe there's a little bit of magic left in her, because when she transforms from her humanoid woman form to her cool fox form, these tails spring up out of nowhere, which definitely were not part of the robot design. So
definitely spring up out of nowhere and not part of the design.
Cool.
Yeah.
But yes, I really like this episode. I think the dynamic between the two leads is very charming. It's very sweet and loving without being explicitly romantic, even though there is some ship teasing in there, which I think is very nice. The environment design is gorgeous. It's one of only a handful of 2D animated episodes, and it's one of a much smaller handful of 2D animated episodes that aren't about a team of mercenaries bloodily killing something. So that's pretty nice. I love the way that they do steampunk, hyper-industrialized Hong Kong. I think it's so gorgeous.
It's spectacular. The way they show the progression of this world across essentially 3 time points. Traditional early industrialization with trains, and then kind of an imagined future, is so cool to see the very clean line through it all. And yet even the 2 different versions of Hong Kong that we get are very distinct, but very true to life in a way that is legitimately very believable as a kind of alternate path. From like what I wanted out of alternate histories, I got in Good Hunting. Of like, let's actually interrogate a concept and look at what happens when a particular idea in the world of this kind of steampunk technology is pursued, and then what that does to the world aesthetically, sure, but also kind of lore-wise, and how the railroads across the country create giant like gashes in the magic fabric of China, which makes this Hulijing unable to transform. That's so simple, but so cool.
Yeah, cold iron and smoke, very interesting. I actually looked up and read the short story this episode was based on. It's very true to the original. There's only a few minor changes. One thing that I liked that didn't really become clear in the episode, but there's a point early on in the episode when they're both kids, when our protagonist's father and our heroine's mother are dueling to the death. They're trying to save this guy who's become enamored and ensorcelled by the Hulijing. They're basically like, no, see, the problem is when a man falls in love with the Hulijing, she becomes able to hear his voice wherever she is, and it's super annoying and it sucks. And then at the very end of the story, when Yan goes off in her new reclaimed fox body to absolutely kick some ass, our protagonist whispers under his breath, "Good luck, Yan," and it's implied that she can hear him because he loves her, and it's like, ah. So it's just a little note, like it's there in the episode. They don't draw attention to it, but anyway, peak. I really like this episode.
Yeah, this episode rules.
Another uncontroversial pick in this crowd, The Very Pulse of the Machine. I think this one is very good and also feels sci-fi in a way that Good Hunting kind of doesn't. I really love Good Hunting. it definitely counts as like spec fic. It's an alternate history, you know, steampunk Hong Kong.
Speculative, but not sci-fi.
But it doesn't feel as sci-fi, whereas The Very Pulse of the Machine feels extremely sci-fi.
Here's the thing. If Good Hunting was written in the 1800s when it is ostensibly set, it would have been sci-fi.
You're so right, actually, yeah. Whereas The Very Pulse of the Machine, like, oh, you know, sci-fi is when you are in space and things are weird. Well, guess what? We're in space and shit's weird. A wounded astronaut exploring the Jovian moon Io is either hallucinating from all the painkillers she's taking to stay functional while she tries to make it to the lander that will let her be alive in 8 hours, or she's actually communicating with the moon Io itself through the still slightly functional corpse of her poetry-loving co-pilot who died in the crash and is now stuck speaking riddles into her brain through the radio because it's kind of hard for a planet to use a human brain. It's really complicated and squishy, and it's full of poetry quotes for some reason. Also, this episode's maybe kind of gay. It's a little bit hard to tell because if it's really happening, it's there's some stuff happening. I really like this episode because it's aesthetically beautiful. It's 3D animated and cell shaded, which is a style that's easy to fuck up. Fish Knight is also animated in this style by this team, but I think they managed to make it absolutely beautiful. And Io itself is gorgeous. Like in normal vision, it's kind of this like dusty yellow, you know, sulfurous crystal with these weird black lava pools. But then through the filter our protagonist uses to try and figure out, like, wait, is this planet actually communicating with me through the corpse of my teammate? It becomes this beautiful aurora, bluish purple, like gorgeous landscape, lights shining. Premise-wise, it's very, very good. Would that be fucked up or what? Because like, what if you were dying on a hostile alien planet, but the planet was in love with you? Like, hell yeah. And at the end of the episode, Io is like, hey, I can't like help you, but I can sort of help you. Like, I might be able to save your mind if you jump into one of my lava pools. I will be able to potentially translate your mind into the consciousness that I am, and you will still be alive in some form, but your body will not be. And basically, she's like, I still don't know if I'm hallucinating or not. This may or may not be really happening. If it's really happening, I'm about to become immortal. If not, I'm about to die. But hey, I guess that's kind of the risk we always take.
I've got a minute of oxygen left anyway, so I might as well.
Yeah, may as well go out in this extremely pretty lava pool. In the short story this is based on, apparently it's a lot less like ambiguous because there's a moment where the moon like actually builds like a bridge for her to cross something on. So like, okay, she can't hallucinate that. And also there's like a little bit in the episode because when she sort of passes out and she thinks she sees her dead teammate that is being possessed by the spirit of the moon, or the technological ghost in the machine of the moon, whatever. It sits up and carries her with its faceplate shining like the poster for The Thing, which I'm sure was an intentional homage. And when we see her kind of awakening at the edge of this lava pit, there's a single set of footsteps that got to the edge, and then she's lying in the dirt a few steps back from that. So the other astronaut was definitely really walking and definitely really walked into the lava pool. That's not controversial. That's like, okay, she's not in hallucinational vision. We can see the footprints. So anyway, I think this episode is very cool. It's very representative of what I like about Love, Death, and Robots as a whole, in that it is a short vignette of a person stuck in a fucked up situation, learning that the universe is bigger and more beautiful than they thought it was, and also more hostile and deadly. And also it's just so pretty.
I also do think that if the dead one actually did, walk and drag the protagonist across Io, it would be a logical extrapolation of what has already been very clearly proven to be true, that the moon can communicate like through the other dead astronaut, and animating a body is not terribly harder, whereas building a bridge as a planet is a little bit more of a stretch. But what I like about the way this is set up is it's a kind of fucked up scenario leading to this crash very far out from where their ship is, but you can see that as the protagonist is dragging the dead astronaut in this little kind of sled along the ground in this kind of sulfuric surface, it's just creating enough static electricity to generate some kind of a pulse, a current that then the moon can kind of pour into, and we actually see later on in the kind of magnetovision that we see all of these swirling light and energy into the open part of her compatriot's face.
The faceplate,
this is all flowing in there. The planet has this electromagnetic soup on it, and you focus it into a point when you drag a dead astronaut across this sulfuric surface, and it just kind of creates a little bit of static.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, that's not how that works in real life, but it's not a stretch to imagine that.
Yep.
And it's cool that it takes a scenario that is not insane on the surface of it and builds it out logically from there, so we as the audience and the character are basically getting more acquainted with the weirdness of the world as it goes. And I think it's very elegantly set up and then developed as an idea over the course of this, again, like 10, 12 minute.
Yeah.
It's just clean fucking storytelling, man.
Yeah. There's just enough scientific underpinning of, yeah, it's conceivable that this could be a thing that makes sense for Io to be able to do. As, of course, it's trying to communicate through a brain that is A, dead, and B, mostly full of poetry quotes, and it's just sort of trying to, like, reference things that draw the living astronaut to the conclusion. It's interesting. It's sort of like this sort of xenofiction Q&A of like trying to get her to understand before she dies of exposure, like, there might be a way for me to save you, and I need you to believe me, because if you don't, you're just gonna die and there's nothing I can do about it. And of course, the machine in the episode, the very pulse of the machine, is one of the quotes from the poems that are used. But also, Io ends up basically managing to communicate, like, I, the planet Io, am in some way a machine. I have all these traits that machines have. It is not inconceivable that I am really talking to you, that I am some sort of artificial intelligence or machine intelligence. I don't know. I'm very tickled by any story where it's like, hey, a planet is not going to think like a person will, but the planet will still love this person and try to help them in a very alien, xenofiction-y kind of way.
Yeah.
This is also a lot of the appeal of the book Nona the Ninth.
Following with that, I love the presentation of the kind of hard boundaries of science, where a machine is a fundamentally different thing from an ecosystem being blurred and then conflated. That is so my shit in science fiction, and I feel like that is not often pursued, because a lot of speculative fiction can maintain, not has to, not all the time, but can maintain these very rigid definitions that we kind of bring into our understanding of science on an everyday level. It's like space is space stuff, which is different from other things. And I like that this blends a sense of ecology and machinery, a kind of psychological element, and then the kind of like gesturing at like a spiritual existence in this weird fucked up moon brain thing. And it all flows together so cleanly, and that's the kind of development of an idea and creation of a tone and a world that I really, really like. And it is unfortunate that the whole rest of the show is not like this for me personally.
That is the danger with a cool anthology series. You get an episode that rewires your brain and you're like, is there more? And it's like, well, there's different.
Yeah.
Yes. I have a couple more episodes that I think are quite good. Obviously, a lot of these episodes are good, but I did want to highlight from season 4, probably the only episode that I really thought was solid. I'm not trying to be mean. There's a lot of cool stuff in season 4, but this was the only one where I was like, I would intentionally rewatch this. And that is How Zeke Got Religion, which is another very simple concept, because the concept is straight out of Hellboy. This could have happened in Hellboy, but there's one reason why I really like this episode. And the thing is, all these episodes are pretty small scale, so there's usually going to be 1 or 2 things in it that you really like. And in this, there's one thing I really like, and it is the design of the threat in this episode, because the premise is simple. Hello, good old American boys. We're going to load you into this plane, and we're going to send you on a bombing run over Nazi-occupied France, and we need you to blow up this church. Have fun. The title character, Zeke, is not the POV character, but he is one of the main characters. And his joke is that he is a straw atheist who thinks that God is stupid, and it's silly to believe in him. And then the joke in this episode is that then they have to fight a fallen angel, and they defeat it by shooting a crucifix into its face. And of course, it's like, yeah, if I were Zeke in that situation, I would probably also start contemplating some things about my place in the universe.
Yeah.
Very clean, simple meal, well made. Tale as old as time, Nazis engaging in a satanic ritual to summon a demon. Again, literally straight out of Hellboy. But this episode is made or broken by the design of the fallen angel, and I love how this thing fucking works. It's horrifying. Yeah. Obviously, for years, we've been making the whole, like, biblically accurate angel is just cosmic horror thing, jokes like, oh yeah, it's a big mass of eyes and wings and woo, it doesn't have knees. It has to say be not afraid because everyone would shit their pants otherwise. But then it's like, hey, aren't there fallen angels? Aren't there angels that went bad? How fucked up would that be if a cosmic horror...
What if they want you to be afraid, in fact?
Yeah, what if being afraid is the point, actually? And this thing, it's so well designed. It's just like, It doesn't.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
It's not even slightly humanoid. The only recognizably humanish thing about it is it has this cherubic golden mask of a face. And clearly, like, that is its face. The mouth can open. It doesn't, like, talk. It just kind of shrieks inhumanly out of mouths
Great
that
monster
form.
design. No talking, only screaming.
No talking, only screaming. It is, in fact, a mass of eyes and wings and arms, but in a very, like, not cool, f***ed up way. I mean, very cool, f***ed up way. There's just a little note of it that I thought was cool, which is, like, when it is initially clawing its way up out of the destroyed church and coming after the bomber, everyone on the plane spontaneously, like, spits up blood, and they're like, what the f***? And then the angel shows up, the fallen angel, and it's like, oh, so just that thing getting near was enough to cause tremendous damage to these people. Like, I'm a big fan when we treat things that are cosmically horrific as like they're almost literally like radioactive, like just being near this thing is unzipping your DNA, like it's just not good. Extremely terrifying. Part of the problem with the anthology series, though, is that this level of like, oh, I understand, like, if this is what hell is like, I understand why it freaks people out so much. Then, 2 episodes later, the plot is cartoon Satan gets outsmarted by a cat, voiced by Vander from Arcane. So, the idea that, like, that's the Satan that's in charge of these fallen angels is genuinely quite funny. It's just like cartoon Cuphead dealmaker Satan, and then, like, these are the guys he's dealing with on a daily basis, which is basically just a Shoggoth in a creepy mask. Like, man, that would be very funny.
I do also like the way this essentially extended fight scene is constructed, where it is all taking place inside of a moving bomber. I liked that they were like, you bombed the church, and then a demon flew out of it.
Yep.
It wants your ass, and you're not far enough away yet, so I hope you're ready to fight inside of a plane. Having this very confined arena to participate in for the rest of the episode, I think is a very good staple of horror, where you are in a very small space with a really fucked up thing, and you can't get out.
Yeah, there's no
I like
way to
that.
run.
That's well constructed.
Yeah, I also like that one of the most interesting horrific elements of a horror story is when the characters aren't clear what the rules are. And it's like, okay, fallen angel, it's a demon, cool. I know some rules, but clearly some of them are wrong. It's not repelled by the crucifix. It does seem to kind of burn when the crucifix touches it, but that just kind of pisses it off. Okay, so it's not like a vampire that you can repel with like 2 candlesticks held appropriately, and everyone who tries gets messily murdered by it. So it's like, oh, okay.
One of the guys starts reciting a prayer, and the other one's like, you're just making it angrier.
Yeah, and then that guy gets immediately murdered. Like, the guy who seems to know what's up gets immediately killed. So now they're extra fucked. But like the gut drop I felt when the guys are reciting the Lord's Prayer in a panic and the other guy's like, shut up, you're just provoking it. I was like, uh-oh, there's rules here and our heroes are not going to learn what they are in time. Again, like, simple meal well made. The part of this episode that is cosmic horror fallen angel is perfect. I cannot think of a way it could be improved. So that was very cool and very awesome. And in terms of another like representative episode of what this show can be like, I have to highlight an episode that I think is high on a lot of people's lists. That is Bad Traveling, which is one of only 4 episodes I think that I put in the catastrophically gross category.
Yes.
Truly, I cannot think of a way they could have made this one yuckier. It is pure horror. It is pure would that be fucked up or what? And the plot is simple. A sailing ship is hijacked by a giant crab. We've all been there. I think that this episode is the paragon of would that be fucked up or what? This would be straight out of the Twilight Zone if the Twilight Zone was allowed to be rated R.
Yeah.
A crew of terrified sailors get trapped in an awful situation, and basically their crab is like, hello, I need you to take me to an island full of people that I can eat and also feed to my children, which are somehow even grosser than me. And they're like, yes, ma'am, whatever you say. But one character, voiced by Troy Baker, is basically like, all right, obviously we are not going to bring the murder crab to the island of innocent, ignorant civilians. We are going to take the murder crab to a further away uninhabited island and maybe all escape with our lives. It's funny because like when I watched this episode, I was like, damn, everyone sucks here. But then at the end, it's like, oh, cool. Troy Baker's character was like heroic and actually managed to save the day in a not very heroic way, but it did work.
Yeah.
But the main thing is essentially he's got the threat of the murder crab, and the also looming threat of mutiny, because everyone else on the ship is so ready to sacrifice that island of civilians if it means they might get out of this situation alive. So he has to, instead of just like taking command and being like, we're gonna do the good thing because that's what heroes do, he has to sneak around and manipulate these people with mutual paranoia to convince them that every single other person on the ship is okay with them risking their own lives to save that island of civilians. There's basically the main turning point in the episode pretty early on is that he arranges for a vote. He has everybody secretly vote on their papers, like, should we make an X to sacrifice the island of civilians like cowards would do, or should we make like a circle to mean we're gonna do the scary heroic thing and take the crab to the other island. And then he says, like, actually I lied, it's not an anonymous vote, I made sure that I would be able to see who made every vote, and I can tell you that only 2 people on the ship voted to sacrifice everybody. And then he shoots 2 of the crew members. And clearly what this is intended to convince everyone of is that he got it wrong and everyone just narrowly escaped. It was them and one other person on the ship who, like, were the only people who were cowardly enough to vote for sacrifice the civilians. And, like, this is just such a complicated little bit of, like, psychological sleight of hand to, like, take advantage of the fact that everyone on the ship is terrified and also make them all paranoid of one another by thinking, like, oh, I'm the only person on the ship who was the coward who would have sacrificed the civilians. I can't talk to anybody about this because I only narrowly escaped in my life because he made a mistake. When in actuality, every single other person on the ship is ready to go and sacrifice those civilians at a glance. And then it's basically just him sort of like dieharding his way through his own like crew constantly trying to mutiny and the murder crab constantly demanding more corpses to eat while he tries to manage to get the crab to the other island, or the third solution he ends up finding just involves exploding the entire ship, which does also work.
But close enough to land that he can in fact sail to a place where he won't immediately die.
Yes, he escapes on a rowboat, and it is a kind of plan that really only works if it's just him. I think that this episode is really, really well made. It is not my personal favorite flavor on account of how catastrophically disgusting it is to watch.
It is,
But like, oh man, the horror of it, the clever, ruthless escape from a very bad situation. There's a little bit of maybe like a really makes you think, doesn't it? We live in a society angle. What would like, oh, everyone was effortlessly willing to sacrifice the island of innocent people, blah, blah, blah. I saw somebody point out that this is kind of a selection bias because when the episode starts and the crab is, attacking the ship, we see it kill a bunch of people who were like the captain, the first mate, all these people who were trying to heroically charge in and stop the murder crab, which means it killed all the people on the ship who were brave and it only left all the people who were scared. So it's everyone who would have been heroic and leaderly enough to convince the crew to sacrifice potentially their own well-being to save this island of civilians. Well, they all died, and one of them is being used as a meat puppet by the crab to give her fucking DoorDash order to the boss. So, like, what are we doing? But yes, I think that this episode, similar to Pop Squad, it is very representative of the heights this show can reach, and it is not necessarily my favorite flavor, but I think that, like, it's always on my rewatch list just to remind myself of, like, how solid it is in the writing department.
Troy Baker did a great job voicing this character. Very compelling English accent. And as a character, it's really satisfying to see someone be very competent at their job. And it's cool that he basically runs down with the attempts to try to fight this thing with a little machete, immediately realizes that's not going to work. And then the crab, holds the dead guy up like, take me to such and such island. And Troy Baker's like, okay, think. And he basically immediately gets enough of an outline of a plan that he can start to, 1, play the crab, and then B, play his crew. So it's cool that he figures out how to get out of this really fucking quickly. And then the rest of it is unspoken blind guarantee of him basically just enacting exactly that.
Exactly.
It's really, really good. And you don't realize he has a plan until probably midway through executing it. Because even still, like when he does the vote, he reveals, I marked your ballots actually, and there's one layer of it. The second layer is he had a better game even beyond just kind of sussing out who the traitors were and shooting them immediately. So you see the layers of his plan as they reveal themselves. It's very, very clever.
Yeah. Also, just like a voice acting note, I think it's very funny that he kind of just like spends most of the episode when he's dealing with the crab with his customer service voice on, like trying to be like, no, of course your request is completely reasonable, and completely fine and normal. So many mouths to feed. What mother would do any less? And it's really funny. Also, like, this is truly one of those fun instances of like, damn, heroism is entirely situational, because like archetype-wise, this guy would be such an effective, magnificent bastard villain in any normal story.
Yes.
But because of the circumstances, he ends up being the only one who can like save this innocent island full of people.
Yeah.
Which is cool and badass, and it almost makes up for all of the slime I had to look at.
I would love to see the after credits scene where he ends up making it to the island on his rowboat, gets off the dock, and is like, "You all are fucking welcome."
He's just like, "Can someone please buy me a drink? I'll explain why later." But yes, those are the 4 main episodes that I wanted to highlight for various reasons. I also have my personal list of 20 episodes that I intentionally would rewatch. Obviously, the ones we just talked about. Lucky 13, I'm not going to go through all of these, I don't have time, but I did want to highlight Lucky 13, and it was almost on my short list of like episodes I wanted to talk about, but it's just like a fun watch. There's not a tremendous amount of depth. Why? Because it is essentially a horse girl movie, but it is about a spaceship, because it's like, oh, you inherit the unlucky temperamental spaceship that nobody wants, but actually the spaceship has a mind of its own and is clearly at least somewhat sentient, and every time it does something weird, it's actually saving your life and your crew, and then at the end it tragically explodes, but in a heroic sacrifice kind of way. So like, Horse Girl, it's a Horse Girl episode, but with a spaceship. Zima Blue is on here, obviously. Life Hutch is the one where Michael B. Jordan fights a malfunctioning robot. That one's pretty fun.
Nice.
Blind Spot is the one I mentioned with the cyborgs raiding the car. Jibaro is very high on a lot of people's lists. I do like Jibaro. I'm not entirely sure why it's not really made my personal favorites list. I think it might just be aesthetically. It's a little bit hard on the eyes. Like, it's beautifully rendered. It looks photoreal, even though if you look at the actual character models, you're like, oh, nobody has nostrils and everyone's beard is drawn on with marker. Okay. Mm-hmm. But something about the way they render the lighting and the camera work makes it look photoreal, and it's got a very cool little arc, and there's no dialogue. I always love an episode or like an installment of a series where they just go like no perceivable dialogue, which is always fun. It's just a lot. It's just kind of hard on the eyes. Gives me a migraine. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Fish Knight's on here because it's very effective. Helping Hand is a peak would that be fucked up or what scenario. An astronaut, it's like the movie Gravity, where it's like, the bad news is,
oh, yes.
Yeah, you're sort of drifting in space. What are you going to do? In space, if you need to move in a direction, you can throw something away from you, and because the momentum, the 0 point of the momentum stays perfectly between you, you will start to move away from it. But she doesn't have anything on her that she can throw, except first the glove from her suit, and then her own arm, which of course rapidly freezes. It's very gross in its own way, but it is a very effective bite-sized like horror story. Secret War is a bunch of Soviet soldiers fighting ghouls. I didn't want to make you watch both Bad Traveling and this, because they are similarly disgusting. So, but it is very effective. Secret War has one gut-wrenching character reveal right near the end of the episode, and they do a lot of like non-verbal storytelling in that episode, just using musical cues, which I think is pretty interesting. It's just, it's solid. It's tragic, but it's solid. Sonnie's Edge I already talked about. Ice Age, that's the one with Topher Grace in the fridge full of little guys.
Yeah.
Beyond the Aquila Rift is another season 1 episode that I think made a lot of people go like, oh my god, this show is amazing. And also it is pretty high on the gross list. I was considering making a slide for this one and I didn't bother because I think it's fine, but I also think it's pretty simple. But there is something funny to be said about Beyond the Aquila Rift, because if you watched season 1, or at least some of season 1, you might have seen this one. This guy and his crew, like, they go into like hypersleep so that their ship can go through a jump gate without them, I don't know, something. It's doing the standard sci-fi thing where if you're like awake and conscious during like some kind of hyper jump, maybe something really bad will happen to your brain. But when they wake up, they are completely off course. They've wound up at a shipyard that is way the hell not where they're supposed to be. But also waiting for the protagonist is his old girlfriend, this like beautiful blonde woman who's just walks out and is like, hello, I'm too good to be true. I mean, your old girlfriend who just happens to be out here. Let's get you all settled in, and I'll see how quickly I can start breaking some news to you. And the reveal is that it turns out that like they are actually even further beyond than they thought they were. They're basically so far outside of known space that there is no way they would ever be able to get back. And also, shockingly, this is not his old girlfriend. This is in fact essentially an alien that is running hospice care on all these stranded alien ships that just wound up in this like junkyard of reality. But the big twist at the end is that she is actually a really nasty looking spider monster, and the aesthetic of the place she has him in is pretty yucky, even though she is herself completely benevolent and does not actually, like, she's not predating on them or anything. They're just in a bad situation and she's trying to make their last days comfortable by like simulating their surroundings to be something nice and familiar. So it's like, it's a big horrific twist that she's a giant spider, but like, we're just working on aesthetic morality at this point. She's done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
She is truly only helping him out. I don't know. I thought that one was pretty funny, but it's like, oh no, where's the horrifying part of the twist? Funny thing on that, actually, I haven't stress tested this little rule of thumb I've been developing, but I have this working theory that if you're watching any sort of like sci-fi or fantasy story and there's a horrific looking creature, but the horrific looking creature speaks in a female voice, this horrific-looking creature will always actually be a good guy. This doesn't apply if she turns into a beautiful woman like Shelob in that one Lord of the Rings game. If she's a beautiful woman who speaks in a beautiful female voice, you can't trust her. But if it's a horrifying monster that speaks in a female voice, they are always actually good. I don't know why, it just keeps happening. Snow in the Desert is peak sick as hell. It's just like an immortal guy in the desert being bounty hunted by guys. It's a slightly edgy AU of Trigun, and that's fine. You know what? That's okay. Trigun is cool. Already talked about Pop Squad. Ice is pure aesthetic by the guys that did Zima Blue.
Ooh, okay, I might watch that one then.
It's pretty simple. The core of that episode is just basically two brothers. One of them is like an enhanced person. It's not entirely clear what that means, but he's like physically very capable. And his brother, who's older than him, is not enhanced. And all of their friends on this new like ice mining world that they've moved to, all of his friends are enhanced. So the older brother's like the odd one out. But he tags along with his younger brother, going out to hang out with his cool new friends, and sort of just sticks around with them doing unwise teen activities that you can do when you are superhuman. But there's like a little like sweet moment of like, oh, his brother like needs help, but like maybe that was just to help him get in good with his cool friends. Anyways, Ice is very aesthetically pretty. I've seen it pretty low on a lot of people's lists because there's not a lot else beyond just like teen shenanigans and like a little brotherly moment. But it's a completely respectable use of about 15 minutes.
Okay.
And they also did the episode 400 Boys, which was another episode in season 4. And I think I understand what they're doing with it, but it took me a couple goes.
Interesting.
400 Boys is like if all of the biker gangs in Akira had the psychic powers that one guy gets in Akira, with similar levels of chaos. But again, visually it's stunning. It's the same animation team as Zima Blue and Ice, so like everything they do looks very cool. But that's my would intentionally rewatch list. And of course I also have my various charts at various points in this video, so if this interests you, hopefully those charts can serve as a guidebook so you don't slam eyeball first into something that is extremely not your speed. And do let me know if you try. I'm genuinely quite curious how well this categorizational approach works to media recommendation, because like I've been trying to crack the fucking code on getting people to watch things that I think are interesting for so much of my life, and if this is the way to do it, I will happily sort other shows into fun little color-coded boxes, because oh man, I wasn't originally planning on doing that much charting, but after a certain point it's just so intoxicating.
Yeah, you have to complete the set.
Except for that one marionette AMV whose name escapes me, but yeah, that one gets to go in the shame bucket. Yeah, can't stop.
Yeah. I think on the subject of like how to recommend media to someone, this is perhaps like the pervasive problem of not just with an anthology series, but like trying to convince a friend of yours to watch or play anything. And a lot of it is a game of knowing what about the thing would appeal to them specifically.
Yeah.
And it becomes like, hey, I know you like these things. Here's why this thing is your stuff. As opposed to, here's this thing that's really cool. You should like it.
Yeah.
Is like basically how we got told to watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's really good. Is there any reason that I would like it? Well, no, but like it's really good. Like, okay, cool, not gonna happen. But I think this points to a solution to this very embedded problem in trying to convey media and getting it to land in someone's brain is something I might be interested in watching when they have essentially no basis in it before it gets explained to them, of like, look to the vibes of the thing rather than, okay, so the plot is about this guy who's in the desert and then he gets like really confused and wakes up and there's like dinosaurs and fish everywhere. As opposed to, it's a melancholy story that is very abstract and aesthetic, and he ends up getting eaten by a shark. But I haven't seen Fish Night, so I can't explain it perfectly, but I'm trying to kind of like mirror some of what you were saying in explaining what it makes the audience feel and what it does kind of metatextually beyond just it's about a guy who passes out and then sees some fish. I think that kind of points to a way to try to to convince people not just to watch a show, but to show them why they might actually enjoy it and be able to help people tailor recommendations to themselves. Where it's like, this book could be really good, but if it's not my shit, I'm not gonna have a good time. Whereas this book could be medium good, but if it is exactly my shit, I'll have a blast. So I think you're onto something here.
I've read some medium good books that are shit, but also my shit, and oh man. But yeah, I do think that, like, ultimately the best person to tell you, like, will this media be something you like, is yourself. And, you know, anyone's metric of quality is going to be on some level completely personal and subjective. Like, I saw some tier lists on that subreddit that were incomprehensible to me, and that's okay, you know, like, that's fine, to each their own. But anytime I was trying to come down on, like, these are the episodes you should watch, I was like, well, I like this one, but I like it for these reasons. And, you know, it's hard to sort of translate that to even one person, let alone however many people watch this video. And I do think that with an anthology series, there is the slight benefit that really you can just kind of jump in and out whenever you want. Because, like, this is also a variant of the strategy I use to recommend other shows to people. Like, if I'm like, no, this show's really good, but I know you don't believe me, and I know you won't get it just by watching, like, the pilot and the first few episodes. So I will, and I've gotten flack for this, I will pick out an episode from the middle of the show that I think is exactly this person's speed. This is how I got my sister to watch Transformers Prime. I gave her a Starscream episode, and she devoured it and said, is there more? And, like, yeah, I got this one from the middle of season 2. Let's start at the beginning so you have context for this diva. And, you know, that works great for an anthology series, and frankly, it also works well for a non-anthology linear series where it's like, this is the kind of thing you can expect from the real high points of this show. And now you have something to look forward to that will keep you invested when you start from the beginning to get all the context. Yeah. I had a lot of fun with this. You know, there's nothing I love more than sorting things into boxes, in case you couldn't tell from the entire Trope Talk series.
Yeah.
I also think this kind of gets to the heart of what we like doing with detailed diatribes, which is like, here's something I like and here's why. Here's what I think about it is so interesting and so lovable.
I think there is, to get back to the beginning of the discussion and talking about, like, zines and science fiction and the short form as a medium, I do want to bring us back to the idea that, like, what Love, Death, and Robots is doing, setting out to do, and largely accomplishing is really, really valuable.
Yes.
In bringing a ton of different ideas and aesthetics and worlds, and showing people that you can, in fact, tell a story that is complete and cohesive in a very small runtime. I adore that shit. That's why I loved writing a short book in the form of the Veneziad. But not to make this about me.
Available on Kickstarter.
The difficulty of that is, of course, they're all different. And it becomes really difficult to kind of cross that bridge of the enthusiast space for people who are, like, in this, where they will watch through everything and be able to enjoy each of them on their own merits, or I guess in the case of, like, a magazine, reading through everything and being able to enjoy each of them on their own merits. And, like, yeah, no, that's super cool. Not all of them vibed with me, but for an enthusiast audience, no one story will be enough to make them bounce off of it and not give the rest of it a chance, because they will be versed in that kind of storytelling and that form factor of the anthology, and they'll be like, oh, that one wasn't my shit. I'll try the next one. Statistically, there's nowhere to go but up. Whereas, for a casual audience that is not familiar with that, they'll watch the first one, be like, and then just bounce off it and never come back.
Yeah.
And this is, again, to the point of, like, it's very difficult to get this kind of short-form storytelling into a wider, more popular media space outside of, like, the Twilight Zone, the one place to do it. And the tone of a lot of those, I feel like, was pretty similar, even if they had different levels of makes you think versus up or what. They were all kind of in that horror thriller space, whereas Love, Death, and Robots is casting a much wider tonal range in terms of, like, genre and stuff like that. So it's a harder problem to solve. And I think it is really cool that they are giving it so strong of an effort, and that it is largely working, and the people who watch it tend to like it. I guess I'm trying to say, if you gave this a shot a long time ago, go back, which is what I basically did. Was I gave it a shot a long time ago. I watched some episodes in season 1. I watched Suits, the mech one. It's like, okay, that's cool.
Yep.
It's like, it's an action sequence. Doesn't really do anything for me. It's, it's action. Would that be f***ed up or what?
Yeah.
Or it's like, oh, I guess this is just there all the time. Neat. See you next Tuesday for more alien fighting. And it's just kind of like, But yeah, so I like what they're doing. I like that this is trying to adapt the process of storytelling in the sci-fi anthology in a way that kind of fits within our modern media ecosystem. It is a challenge, but I like what they're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up Suits, because that episode is strange to me. Of course, it's got the last minute twist.
Yeah.
Where they spend the whole episode, fighting off these alien bug locust things that are breaching their high-tech farm barriers. And then at the end, it pulls out and it shows like, oh my gosh, this is actually the aliens' world. These farm communities are little colonizing outposts protected by a big dome, and instead of these locust monsters just being like a seasonal threat they need to deal with, they're on their planet. So like suddenly this narrative that has a very strong intentional, like, American Southern, good old farm, rural community coming together to help each other out thing has suddenly smacked you right in the face with, also, this is a colonialist effort on an alien world, and the taming of this wild locust planet is maybe not the heroic, good old rural community coming together aesthetic that we wanted it to be. It's a weird episode where the final reveal reframes the entire thing in a way that I don't think the guys who wrote the episode were maybe aware of, because I was reading up, I found like some art books about this, and with Suits, they were like, yeah, initially it was going to be revealed that like, oh, the DBs come every season, they're basically like locusts, and they have to do this constantly, but it's just like, a standard thing. But we thought it would be cooler if the big twist is that actually they're on their planet, and it's like, well, it certainly is more nuanced, it adds more layers to the story.
Yeah. Interesting. If they said that outright, that's... I guess that does confirm that reading, because I interpreted it as like Warhammer bad ending, the Tyranids have won, like they're the last corner that has not been eaten up by the swarm. If the creators said outright they're on the locust planet, I guess that reframes things. I don't want to get too far in the weeds of just Suits when we're in the conclusion space, but I really like what Love, Death, and Robots is doing, and having come back to it, it's like, oh, I appreciate it a lot more than I did. Even the episodes that I liked, I am, 7 years better at media analysis, even though this is still like my maybe third foray into proper science fiction, at all. Not a Star Trek kid growing up. I am aware of it, and that's about as far as it goes. So it's an interesting problem to try to tackle in adapting it to a new medium, to a new media ecosystem, and trying to make it mass market on a platform like Netflix, where it really has to be pretty mass market in order to survive. But clearly it's done well enough to get multiple seasons against a very capricious Netflix season renewal system.
Yeah.
So I hope this creates more of a space for this kind of short form stories in our popular culture, because obviously zines haven't really gone anywhere, but as far as I, a casual observer, am aware, they have not managed to carve out much more of a space for themselves than they originally had. And I like that this is kind of breaking that boundary into a mass market popular perception, and I want to see what that does. I want to see what that does going forward, because we've seen also at the same time that Love, Death, and Robots is beginning popular, the crossing of kind of fantasy into sci-fi, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, and the bringing of a lot of these very kind of hard speculative elements into a lot of big epic fantasy. The opposite end of it then is going to be, do we recreate this form factor of the short story in an anthology or not? The ideas of sci-fi, but what about the form factor of it? So it'll be interesting to see what this does in the next 5-10 years or beyond.
Yeah, I mean, sci-fi zines still exist in a lot of these cases. Like, a lot of these magazines, when I looked them up, had currently active updating websites. Obviously, in the internet age, a lot of zine distribution has changed, but I think that there is still a very lively space for the weird short form, experimental kind of transgressive storytelling out there. It's very rare for it to make its way down to a mainstream audience, which is why, Love, Death, and Robots basically producing like a little water slide shortcut of like how to get straight from like your pen to the eyeballs of the viewers. I think that this is extremely cool, and I definitely want to see more attempts in this vein. But I also know how, like you said, capricious the renewal system is. So it's kind of like, man, I hope enough other people can see the merit in this to let it stay alive long enough to like give us more cool stuff. Because man, what this is doing is so cool and valuable, and I think it's, you know, science fiction as a genre is a little bit on the outskirts of things. It's a little bit difficult for a mainstream audience to necessarily click in with what makes it work. But the number of times I've seen people be like, "Oh, I get it. This does actually slap." It's not small. You know, there's ways in.
Yeah.
There's ways to show people the light. And so I hope that this has been fun. I had a great time, so I can never tell like how fun it is for anyone else.
I had a good time. I really enjoyed the episodes that I watched, except
Hell
for
yeah.
Alternate Histories.
Except for Alternate Histories,
The
yeah.
four that I saw were really great. Going over them in my head, it's hard to pick out a favorite. I think I really love Zima Blue so much. In terms of like cool shit per minute of screen time, I think that one might take it for me, but the very pulse of the machine really surprised me with how much it stuck with me. I think Good Hunting was the one that I enjoyed watching the most as it was unfolding in front of me, but I really like what they were doing with Very Pulse of the Machine.
Hell yeah. It's always a good sign when the recommendation algorithm works. But yeah, I think that's about all I had on this note in a crisp almost 2 hours.
Almost.
Yeah. So,
Bye.